Hey Steelers Nation, things have gotten tense in the last few hours after what came out in the media, and you can't miss anything. A Steelers head coaching candidate receives a signal that nobody expected. At the same time, Ben Roethlisberger gave an opinion on the quarterback situation that could change everything if Aaron Rodgers doesn't return. And to top it all off, a veteran Super Bowl champion is ready to come to the Steelers. Let's start by talking about the subject that's been dominating the media in the last few hours. Steelers fans, this head coach search is turning into a full marathon, not a sprint. Pittsburgh hasn't rushed into anything, hasn't forced an interview, hasn't tried to just pick someone and hope for the best. And honestly, that's probably the smartest thing they've done all offseason. They still haven't had an in-person sit-down with Chris Shula or a few of the other big names floating around, and there's a real chance this whole thing drags past the Super Bowl. Annoying? Sure, but better slow and right than fast and wrong. While everyone's been waiting, Dan Orlovsky jumped into the conversation on NFL Live and basically grabbed a megaphone for Anthony Weaver, the Dolphins' defensive coordinator. Orlovsky was fired up, saying, "Sign me up for Weaver in Pittsburgh, sign me up." And he wasn't just being loud for entertainment, he backed it up. Orlovsky's point was simple. Great coaches either elevate a bad roster or maximize a good one. And in his eyes, Weaver took a Miami defense that was short on top-end talent, battered by injuries, missing Jalen Ramsey for most of the year, and still kept them fighting every single week. He made them competitive when they probably had no business being competitive. The stats won't blow anyone away, 22nd in yards allowed, middle of the pack in sacks and takeaways. But Orlovsky basically said, without Weaver, they're way worse, and he might be right. Pittsburgh already did a virtual interview with Weaver, but that's not enough for a decision this big. If this thing stretches well into February, don't be surprised if they bring him into the building to really see what he's about. They want to know if Miami's struggles were because of the defense, or if Weaver was the reason they weren't ranked dead last. And here's why Steelers Nation is paying attention. Weaver walking into Pittsburgh gets him a lot more to work with. You're talking about a generational edge-rushing duo, young corners who can actually play, and a defense that's always just one or two pieces away from turning back into Blitzburg. Add some youth to the D-line and the safety room, and Weaver could take this group from good to scary. But there's a catch. And it's a big one. If Weaver becomes the head coach, he's got to nail his coordinator hires. First, he needs an offensive coordinator who can fix a unit that's been struggling for years. Then he has to decide whether he wants to run the defense himself or bring in another strong defensive mind to handle it. Before any of that though, he's got to walk into Pittsburgh, look ownership in the eye, and prove he's the guy. And right now, Orlovsky sure thinks he is. And if that already had Steelers fans arguing everywhere, the next update just dropped. And it's about the most important spot on the field. Alright, let's talk quarterbacks, because this one came straight from a guy who knows the position in Pittsburgh better than almost anyone alive, Ben Roethlisberger. On his podcast this week, Big Ben didn't sugarcoat a thing. With Aaron Rodgers still undecided about his future, Roethlisberger said exactly who he thinks should take over if Rodgers calls it quits. And he didn't hesitate. If Aaron retires, Will Howard should start and bring in a vet minimum guy like Carson Wentz, he said. Now, before anybody rolls their eyes at a 6th round pick being mentioned as QB1, pump the brakes. Will Howard isn't your average day 3 dart throw. The guy is a national champion. He literally won the title with Ohio State months before the Steelers drafted him. And on top of that, he just spent a whole year behind Rodgers, learning from one of the sharpest dudes to ever play the position. Big Ben's point wasn't that Howard is the next Brady, even though Brady was also a 6th rounder, and we all know how that went. His point was that Howard brings upside with basically zero downside. He's cheap, he's young, he's competitive, and he's already played in massive games with real pressure. For a franchise going through transition, that matters a ton. Rodgers could still come back. Nobody knows for sure. What complicates everything is the Mike Tomlin factor. Rodgers and Tomlin clicked, and Rodgers loved playing for him. But with Tomlin stepping down after nearly 2 decades, there's no guarantee Rodgers wants to stay under a totally new coaching staff, or that the new staff even wants him. The whole situation is a fog machine right now. That's why Roethlisberger's comments hit differently. He's basically saying, look, if we're entering a new era anyway, just let the kid play, build around him, and get a veteran who who can mentor him and hold the fort if needed. Carson Wentz fits that mold perfectly. Cheap, experienced, and willing to help. If Howard struggles, Wentz can run the offense for a few games. And if both struggle, well, the Steelers probably aren't winning a Super Bowl next year anyway, and a rough season might land them a premium draft pick in the loaded 2027 class. The only thing everyone agrees on is that change is coming. New head coach, new staff, new direction. After 19 years of stability, the Steelers are walking into unfamiliar territory. And in moments like this, taking a swing on a young QB with real upside doesn't sound crazy at all. Big Ben clearly sees something in Howard. Now the question is whether the Steelers will too. And just when everybody thought the QB talk was over, another name jumped into the mix. A Super Bowl MVP nobody expected. All right, Steelers fans, buckle up because this one is wild. Joe Flacco, yes, that Joe Flacco, says he's open to playing for Pittsburgh. A guy who spent most of his career trying to ruin Steelers Sundays is suddenly saying, yeah, I'd consider it. Nobody had that on their offseason bingo card. Flacco was on the Be More Sports podcast when the question came up, and instead of laughing it off, he actually thought about it. He admitted it would feel strange, especially stranger than playing for the Browns or Bengals, despite those teams being divisional rivals too. His exact words, having a Pittsburgh Steelers jersey on would be a little more strange, but at this point I'm open to most things if there's an opportunity. And honestly, you can kind of see where he's coming from. The guy's been everywhere. After leaving Baltimore, he's played for a new team almost every season, hopping around the league like a veteran mercenary. He just wants to play football. He literally said, I love playing. It's my job. If someone's hiring me, that's a big deal. It's not about rivalries for him anymore. It's about staying on the field. But here's where it gets spicy for Steelers Nation. Flacco has history with Pittsburgh, and not friendly history. Just last season when Joe Burrow went down and the Bengals traded for Flacco, he came in and torched the Steelers. Threw for 342 yards, 3 touchdowns, and fed Jamar Chase like it was an all-you-can-eat buffet. Pittsburgh's defense completely collapsed on short routes and got burned for 161 yards by Chase alone. Flacco wasn't just playing quarterback, he was playing villain, and now he might switch sides. That's WWE level storyline energy. The Steelers' QB situation makes this even more interesting. Rodgers is heading into free agency. Nobody knows if he wants to return without Mike Tomlin. The franchise might be shifting toward youth with Will Howard. Mason Rudolph is under contract, but isn't considered a long-term answer. So yeah, a veteran like Flacco could slide into that room pretty naturally, depending on how the offseason plays out. He wouldn't be brought in as a savior, he wouldn't be the franchise guy. But as a bridge QB, a mentor, a steady hand if Howard isn't ready. That actually makes a lot of sense. And the craziest part, Flacco seems genuinely open to it. No bitterness, no rivalry talk, just opportunity. At this stage of his career, that's all he wants. Steelers fans might need a minute to process it. The idea of a Ravens legend walking into Acrisure Stadium in black and gold. But hey, the NFL has seen stranger things. Man, this offseason is already chaos. New coach, QB questions, veterans circling back, everything's on the table. So tell me, who should lead this team next year? Drop your take and hit subscribe so you don't miss a single update from Steelers Nation.